Story here tonight, the bodies being found in Houston bayous. Houston police report another body was just recovered today from the Buffalo Bayou area near Jensen and East downtown. So if you've been watching and keeping track alongside us, that is 4 bodies recovered in 4 days.
Houston has a serial killer problem that officials are desperately trying to hide from you. In the past year alone, at least 16 bodies have been pulled from Houston's bayous, with some reports citing up to 23 inches the broader Harris County area. But here's what they don't want you to know. A terrifying cluster of 7 bodies discovered in about a month, including 5 bodies in just 5 days this September, has sparked absolute panic across social media. And while Mayor John Whitmire and the Houston Police Department are holding press conferences, insisting there's no serial killer on the loose, the evidence tells a very different story that will send chills down your spine. The situation is so disturbing that retired detectives are now connecting these deaths to the controversial smiley face killers theory, suggesting an organized network of killers who dump intoxicated victims in waterways across the country. But officials, they're refusing to investigate these connections, and the reason why will piss you off. Let's start with the facts they can't hide. The medical examiner's records show at least 22 bodies recovered from Houston area bayous through September 2025, and that number has now climbed to 23 with the latest discovery on October 8th in White Oak Bayou. But here's the terrifying part. This is actually lower than the 24 to 26 bodies found in 2024. Which means this has been happening for years, and nobody noticed until September's cluster made it impossible to ignore. The timeline of September's discoveries is alarming. On September 15th, the body of 20-year-old Jade McKissick was found in Brays Bayou, a University of Houston honors student who had gone missing just days earlier after leaving a midtown bar.
One of them was identified as 20-year-old Jade Sage McKissick. She was a U of H student, reported missing on September 11th, last seen that day near the 3700 block of McGregor by a restaurant.
But that same morning, hours later, another body was pulled from Green's Bayou. 43-year-old Rodney Ricardo Chatman. Then, on September 16th, 4-year-old Seth Joseph Hansen was found in White Oak Bayou. September 18th, 3-year-old Arnulfo Alvarado discovered in Buffalo Bayou, with a witness reporting seeing him enter the water without resurfacing. September 20th brought 6-year-old Michael Andrea Rice from Buffalo Bayou. And on September 26th, an unidentified woman later named Michaela Miller was found in Buffalo Bayou with a distinctive 888 tattoo on her wrist. 5 bodies, 5 days. And the city's response? Denial.
We do not have any evidence that there is a serial killer loose in Houston, Texas. Let me say that again. There is no evidence that there is a serial killer loose on the streets of Houston.
But Houston residents aren't buying it. Social media exploded with theories, TikTok videos warning about a Bayou killer racking up hundreds of thousands of views. People started connecting dots that officials seemed desperate to keep separate, and they had good reason to be suspicious. Because here's what makes this case truly terrifying. The victims span an incredibly diverse range, ages from 14 to 69, both men and women, multiple ethnicities, including Black, white, and Hispanic individuals. Some are homeless, some are students, and some have families. Approximately 13 Black, 5 white, and 3 Hispanic victims with various backgrounds. This diversity is exactly what makes serial killer investigations so difficult, because it doesn't fit the typical profile. But wait, it gets worse. Of the 22 confirmed recoveries through September, only 6 have determined causes of death. Most are pending or undetermined. The few that are confirmed, accidental drownings with contributing factors like methamphetamine toxicity, PCP, and ethanol, which means the vast majority of these deaths remain unexplained months later. And that's where the cover-up gets really disturbing. Mayor Whitmire held not one but two press conferences on September 23rd and 30th specifically to address the rumors of a serial killer.
There is no evidence that there's a serial killer loose on the streets of Houston. If there was, you would hear it from me first.
His explanation? Houston has 2,500 miles of bayous and waterways, so bodies ending up there is just an unfortunate circumstance. He blamed homelessness, mental health issues, alcohol use, and accidents. Police Chief Noe Diaz and Captain Salam Zia backed him up, stating there's no evidence connecting any of the cases. But here's the problem with their story. The locations paint a very different picture. Bodies have been discovered primarily in four major bayous: White Oak, Buffalo, Brays, and Greens. These discoveries are clustered near urban trails, bridges, and areas with high homelessness. White Oak Bayou has seen multiple recoveries near Taylor Street and interstate junctions. Buffalo Bayou sites are near downtown trails and bridges at Jensen Drive and Commerce Street. These aren't random locations spread across 2,500 miles. These are specific spots that someone would know about, spots where bodies could be disposed of without immediate detection. And that's what has experts really concerned. Now here's where this story takes an absolutely chilling turn that will make you question everything officials are telling you. Retired detective Kevin Gannon has explicitly connected the Houston deaths to the controversial smiley face killers theory, a theory suggesting an organized gang or network has been targeting vulnerable people near water and dumping them to disguise murders as accidental drownings.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think obviously the first thing they're going to utilize is autopsies, right? What were the cause of death?
The smiley face theory has been controversial since it first emerged, with critics dismissing it as a coincidence. But here's what they don't tell you. The theory involves young men found drowned in waterways across the Midwest, often with smiley face graffiti found near the recovery sites. The FBI dismissed it. Law enforcement across multiple states refused to investigate connections. Sound familiar? Now, Houston doesn't have the signature graffiti, but forensic expert Joseph Giacalone notes the unlikelihood of coincidence in the clustering and calls for thorough reviews of timelines and toxicology. And that's when the parallels to other cases become absolutely terrifying. Let me tell you about the Green River Killer case, Gary Ridgway, because the similarities will haunt you. Starting in 1982, bodies of young women began appearing in Washington's Green River. The first victim, 6-year-old Wendy Caulfield, was found on the 15th of July 1982. 4 more bodies surfaced soon after, and initially, authorities treated them as isolated incidents, attributing deaths to the high-risk lifestyles of the victims, just like Houston is doing now. Ridgway specifically dumped bodies in water to wash away evidence. He targeted vulnerable women, sex workers, runaways, knowing they were less likely to be reported missing promptly. By the time a task force was formed in 1983, bodies had accumulated to 49 confirmed victims. It took DNA advancements and 20 years before his 2001 arrest. 20 years of denied connections, of dismissed concerns, of isolated incidents. But Houston's case is even more complex because the victim diversity actually mirrors another case that remains unsolved to this day, IWS 2, the Jeff Davis 8 murders in Louisiana. Between May 2005 and August 2009, 8 women were killed in Jennings, Louisiana. Bodies were dumped in bayous, swamps, and canals. Victims shared backgrounds in sex work and drug use, often knowing each other. Theories include a serial killer, drug-related hits, or even police involvement since victims were informants. Sound familiar? Vulnerable victims, water disposal, Louisiana Bayou country where isolation aided concealment, and to this day, arrests like Byron Chad Jones and Lawrence Nixon were dropped due to lack of evidence. The case remains open, with theories ranging from conspiracy to cover-up.
Listen, I think it's a lot of bodies. I hate to be so blunt, Jesse. I understand, Houston, there are bayous, right? This is very common. There are waterways in these areas. That part's not unusual. But in my opinion, the volume, right? The volume over, a 7-month period, or to me, piques my curiosity.
But wait, Houston itself has a history of this. Ever heard of the Texas killing fields? A 25-acre stretch along I-45 between Houston and Galveston, where over 30 unsolved murders occurred. Many young women were dumped in fields near bayous and oil refineries. Bodies like Laura Miller and Haiti Villarreal Fay were disposed in watery, overgrown areas. Some cases were solved. William Reese confessed to 4 in 2016. But many remain unsolved, with theories of multiple killers using the isolated location. And Houston's bayous? They're nearby, creating a theoretical link if patterns extend. Now let's talk about what officials are really afraid of. Because Houston isn't the first Texas city to face this exact situation. Remember Austin's Lady Bird Lake? At least 38 bodies have been recovered since 2018, sparking identical rumors of a rainy street ripper. And just like Houston, authorities consistently denied serial connections, attributing deaths to accidents often linked to alcohol. But here's the pattern nobody wants to acknowledge. Water-based body disposals are incredibly effective at masking evidence.
So interestingly, by putting the bodies in water, you are really destroying a lot of the evidence. And so part of me wonders if that is very convenient for them to be able to do, right? You don't have to necessarily clean, a crime scene or clean a body and make sure that you haven't left any kinds of forensic evidence behind.
Decomposition accelerates evidence loss. Currents wash away forensic traces. Water makes it nearly impossible to determine the exact time or location of death. And in Houston specifically, the heat and humidity of Texas accelerate decomposition even faster, making forensic analysis incredibly difficult. This is exactly why retired Detective Joseph Giacalone is calling for comprehensive case-by-case reviews, including 48-hour timeline reconstructions. Because without that level of scrutiny, connections can be missed, patterns can be overlooked, and killers can continue operating. Now here's where we get into what officials are really hiding from you, and why the truth about Houston's Bayou deaths might be far more complicated than either side wants to admit. Because while Mayor Whitmire insists there's no serial killer, the real story involves systemic failures, ignored warning signs, and a pattern of dismissing vulnerable victims that goes back decades. Let's start with what forensic experts are saying privately versus publicly. Professor Krista Gehring notes that no cooling-off periods or patterns align with typical serial behavior. But she also states that the lack of evidence doesn't mean connections don't exist. It means the investigation hasn't found them yet.
Sometimes it can conflict in terms of just if it isn't true, right? Just the sheer volume, right, of calls and leads that they would have to investigate. And then what that can do is actually stifle legitimate investigations that these departments are conducting, right?
And that's the key issue. Houston PD is so focused on denying the serial killer theory that they may be missing other patterns.
But it sounds to me that if they are very quickly saying none of this is nefarious, they're not necessarily, in my opinion, then open to taking leads in investigations, which is also problematic on the flip side, right?
Because here's what the DATA actually shows. Of the 22 confirmed recoveries through September, causes are finalized for only 6 cases. That's 27%. 13 remain pending. 3 are undetermined, which means for 73% of these deaths, we still don't know how they died months later.
Interested to know, potentially in the one that's been determined as drowning, if there were drugs in their system, what got them into the water in the first place.
The case of Jade McKissick is particularly suspicious. A 20-year-old University of Houston honors student, last seen September 11th after leaving a midtown bar. Her body was found September 15th in Bayou near campus. Police stated preliminarily there were no signs of foul play, with evidence suggesting she walked into the bayou. But why would an honors student walk into a bayou after leaving a bar? Her family held a vigil, describing her as beloved in the community. Her funeral was held October 11th at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church.
We have to be really careful about especially statements when we're saying, retaliation against the person responsible for this, because, even when we saw in the Idaho case, which I know you and I have talked about before, people are singled out who have nothing to do with any of this.
But here's what's really happening. Houston residents are terrified.
A lot of people are just wondering, what's the deal? HPD hasn't really given us a lot of information either. What questions do you have?
I mean, is there somebody paying attention to these? Is there more details to investigation? I don't know. It's just kind of scary at this point. When it's that many coincidences. There's not such a coincidence that happens multiple times.
There's long-term plans and there's short-term plans. I would hope that the short-term plans are in effect and something is being done.
And their concerns are valid, because City Council member Carolyn Evans-Shabazz admitted that surveillance cameras along bayous are essentially impossible to implement effectively.
I have heard that suggestion, but I don't know how we could implement that. To say that we can install cameras, we would have no idea where to put them because we don't know where the bodies went into the bayou.
Think about that for a second. Officials claim these are random accidents, but they can't install cameras because they don't know where to put them, which means they're admitting they have no idea where these incidents are occurring. But somehow they're certain there's no pattern? Historical data shows Houston had 20 bayou deaths in 2024, 9 inches 2023. But go back further and the patterns become disturbing. Because Houston has a history of water-based deaths being dismissed or explained away. Remember the Black Widow case of Lynette Bell? A Louisiana woman who poisoned multiple men targeting vulnerable individuals. She appeared as a kind church-going widow but used arsenic to eliminate partners for financial gain. At least 6 men died suspiciously, with arsenic confirmed in several cases. The parallel? For years, rumors circulated that Bell was poisoning people, but no action was taken. It wasn't until 1984, when daughter Debbie provided testimony confirming her mother's use of arsenic, that investigations finally began. Even then, exhumations on the 12th of July 1984 yielded definitive arsenic in only some bodies due to decomposition. The lesson? Sometimes the truth takes decades to emerge. Sometimes authorities miss obvious patterns because victims are marginalized. Sometimes water and time destroy the evidence that could prove connections. Now here's where the conspiracy gets deep, because social media speculation isn't just random panic. Posts claiming all victims black or Austin killer moved to Houston spread rapidly despite lacking evidence, but some posts are asking legitimate questions that officials refuse to answer. But HPD has consistently refused to provide details to reporters on scene.
We haven't. I have been on the scene of the last 2 recoveries, hoping to hear something from a public information officer. Haven't heard anything.
So which is it? Total transparency or media blackout? Houston City Council is exploring safety measures like better lighting, but dismissed fencing as impractical given the 2,500 miles of waterways. Enhanced patrols have been suggested but not confirmed as implemented. And meanwhile, investigations continue without arrests. As of the 13th of October 2025, no one has been charged in connection to the 23 deaths. So, what's the real story here? Is Houston dealing with a serial killer that officials are covering up? Multiple unrelated accidents that just happen to cluster? A combination of accidents, suicides, and possible foul play cases? An organized network like the smiley face killers theory suggests? Systemic issues with how vulnerable populations are protected? The honest answer? We don't know. And that's because officials have been so focused on denying the serial killer theory that they haven't been transparent about what they do know. What we can say with certainty is that 23 people are dead. Most causes remain undetermined. Vulnerable populations continue to be at risk, and the public deserves answers. Because here's what really matters. Whether it's one killer, multiple killers, or tragic accidents, People are DIYing in Houston's bayous at an alarming rate. And until we get real answers backed by complete forensic analysis, the speculation will continue, the fear will grow, and more bodies may be found. Houston residents who walk, run, or bike along bayou trails daily are rightfully concerned. Families of victims deserve to know how their loved ones died. The community needs transparency, not dismissals. So, whether you believe the official story or suspect something more sinister, one thing is clear: Houston's bayou deaths represent a public safety crisis that demands answers, complete answers, not politically convenient explanations, but forensic truth. And until those answers come, the question remains: is there a serial killer in Houston's bayous, or is something even more disturbing happening that we haven't figured out yet? The bodies tell a story. We just need officials to stop dismissing it and start investigating it with the seriousness it deserves. Stay safe out there, Houston, and stay vigilant. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.